I stared in disbelief as flames consumed my wedding gown, the ivory satin curling into blackened tendrils of smoke. Months of fittings, custom lace, and careful planning had been reduced to a smouldering pile on the hardwood floor of the Grand Pavilion's bridal suite. Across from me stood Margaret Wilson, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, her manicured fingers still clutching a silver lighter, her face twisted with triumph and hatred. "You'll never marry my son now," she declared, her voice trembling with satisfaction. "Jason deserves someone from our world, not some charity case from the wrong side of Cleveland." I could barely breathe, the acrid smoke filling my lungs as her words struck deeper than the flames ever could. My name is Valerie Mitchell, and at 25, I never imagined my wedding day would start with arson. Behind me, my 3 bridesmaids stood frozen, their lavender dresses bright against the darkened, smoking ruin at my feet. Jessica, my maid of honor, was the first to find her voice. "Mrs. Wilson, what did you just do?" Margaret's smile was chilling. "I saved my son from the biggest mistake of his life." I reached for my phone, my hand steady in a way that surprised even me. "You have no idea what you've just done," she sneered, eyes narrowing. "Oh, spare me the melodrama. You think you're clever, but you were never going to last in this family. My Jason belongs with someone like Melissa Hammond, whose father actually owns something in this town." Without a word, I pressed a button on my phone and turned the screen toward her. Her smugness faltered instantly. On the screen, streaming in real time, was a perfect view of the ceremony site downstairs, the white chairs, the floral arch, and the massive projector screen now displaying the very scene unfolding in the bridal suite. The guests, including Jason's grandparents watching remotely from Florida and my sister stationed overseas, had just witnessed every word Margaret had said, every cruel, unfiltered confession. "What is that?" Margaret's voice was shrill. "The wedding live stream," I said, my voice calm despite the fury building in my chest. "It's been running for the past 20 minutes. Everyone saw you light my dress on fire and announce exactly what you think of me." She lunged for the phone, her composure snapping. "You set me up, you little—" Jessica stepped between us. "I'd think very carefully about your next move, Mrs. Wilson, because every guest downstairs already knows what you did." The phone buzzed with incoming messages. My bridesmaid Tina glanced at the screen and gasped. "It's Jason. He's coming up here." Margaret's face drained of colour, her confidence crumbling. She looked around the room wildly, as if expecting a way out to appear from thin air. "This isn't what it looks like. I was just testing the fabric. Wedding dresses are supposed to be fire resistant." From the phone speaker, we could hear the murmur of the crowd below, the quiet chaos of guests whispering to each other. Someone had shifted the live stream camera, capturing Jason's stunned expression at the altar. His best man was already heading toward the building, and Jason was running up the aisle, tuxedo and all, fury etched into every line of his face. "Valerie," Melody whispered beside me, "should we tell the guests to go home?" I looked down at the charred scraps of my dream dress, my mind already moving past the shock. Practicality kicked in, the part of me that worked 2 jobs to put myself through college, while Margaret's son coasted on his family's money. "No," I said firmly. "The ceremony is happening, just not the way anyone expected." The door burst open with a loud crack, and there stood Jason. His blue eyes took in the scene, the smoke curling toward the ceiling, the scorched fabric, his mother's guilty stance. Mr. Wilson stood just behind him, his face grim. "Mom," Jason said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Tell me I didn't just see you set Val's dress on fire." Margaret's smile reappeared, weaker this time. Sweetheart, it's not what it looks like. I was trying to protect you. She's after your money. I was just exposing her real motives. Jason shook his head, his face darkening with every word. Stop. Just stop. He turned to me, taking my hands in his, the heat of the moment softened by the warmth in his eyes. Val, I'm so sorry. I swear I had no idea. I squeezed his hands gently, ignoring the tears burning the back of my throat. It's just a dress, I said quietly, though we both knew it was so much more. But your mother just showed everyone exactly what she thinks of me. Jason's grip tightened, silent confirmation that he knew the truth too. Valerie. Mr. Wilson stepped forward, his voice heavy with regret. I'm so sorry. He turned to his wife, his disappointment palpable. Margaret, what have you done? She's not right for him, Richard. Margaret's voice pitched higher, her desperation breaking through the cracks in her polished exterior. Melissa Hammond. She's from a proper family. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it will be when Jason's friends find out he married her? Richard Wilson shook his head slowly. Embarrassing? No, Margaret. What's embarrassing is the entire room full of people who just watched you commit arson because you think our son's happiness should be bought. Jason didn't even look at his mother. His eyes stayed locked on me. Val, do you still want to get married today? I took a deep breath, glancing down at the ashes where my dream had once been. Then I looked up at Jason, the man who had stood beside me through late nights, career struggles, and all the times his mother tried to make me feel small. Yes, I said, but not in that dress. Jason smiled, genuine and full of the love that had brought us here in the first place. Then let's do it, however you want. Are you insane? Margaret shrieked. You're throwing away your future. No, Mom, Jason said simply. I'm choosing it. As Jason turned to leave the room, his hand clasped firmly around mine, I felt the weight of Margaret's hatred fall away like a heavy coat I no longer needed. I didn't need her approval. I never had. I had Jason, my friends, and my own strength, and that was more than enough. Downstairs, the guests were still murmuring, unsure whether to stay or go. I stepped into the hallway, taking a deep breath before addressing them through the live stream camera. There's been a change of plans, I said, my voice clear. The dress is gone, but the wedding isn't. Jessica beamed at me from the doorway. I have an idea. Whatever happened next, it would be our wedding, not a society event or a Wilson family showpiece. Ours. And nothing, not even Margaret Wilson, could take that away. My phone vibrated continuously as notifications poured in, messages from friends, family, and even some distant relatives who were watching the chaos unfold on the live stream. The venue coordinator hovered nervously in the doorway, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest. Miss Mitchell, she said cautiously, the guests are asking what's going on. Should I make an announcement? I took one last look at the blackened remains of my dress, then at my bridesmaids, still standing strong in their lavender gowns, eyes full of support. A plan was already forming in my mind. Margaret's sabotage wasn't going to end this wedding, it was going to transform it into something no one would ever forget. Tell them there's been a slight change of plans, I said, smoothing my hands down my robe, but the ceremony will begin in 20 minutes. Margaret let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. In what? Your underwear? Do you really think you can just pull a wedding gown out of thin air? In my backup dress, I said evenly. Jason's brow furrowed. You have a backup dress? I didn't. But when you work in advertising, especially in crisis management, you learn to always have a plan B, even if you have to invent it on the spot. Melody, I turned to my bridesmaid. Remember that photo shoot we did for Cleveland Bride last month? Can you call Eliza? Ask if her sample dress is still available. Melody's eyes lit up with understanding. The ivory sheath with the lace overlay, it fit you perfectly. Jason's father stepped forward without hesitation, already dialing his phone. I'll send my driver to pick it up. Just tell me where it is. As they coordinated the delivery, I turned back to Margaret, whose expression had shifted from smug triumph to mounting panic. Her perfect plan was falling apart before her eyes. You really thought destroying a dress would destroy my marriage? I asked quietly. You underestimated both of us. Margaret's hands trembled, her face flushing red. Everyone's watching this disaster, she hissed. They'll remember this humiliation forever. They will, I agreed calmly. They'll remember that even after you tried to tear me down, Jason and I stood up together. They'll remember that love doesn't crumble just because someone lights a match. I lifted my phone toward the live stream camera, addressing the guests directly. To everyone watching, thank you for your patience. There's been a bit of unexpected excitement, but the wedding is still happening. We'll be starting shortly, and if today has proven anything, it's that love always finds a way, even when someone tries to burn it down. Applause erupted from the speakers, distant but loud enough to fill the room. Jason gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, pride and love unmistakable in his eyes. Mom, Jason said, his voice quiet but firm, you need to leave. Dad will drive you home. You are no longer welcome at our wedding. Margaret's face contorted with disbelief. You're choosing her over your own mother? After today? Jason's expression was heartbreakingly resolute, without hesitation. The next 20 minutes passed in a whirlwind of motion. While Margaret was escorted, loudly protesting, out of the venue, Eliza arrived, not just with the dress we'd hoped for, but with 3 options in different styles. The bridal suite transformed into a fashion triage, with Melody, Jessica, and even the venue seamstress working to adapt the sample to fit me perfectly. This one, Jessica declared, holding up the delicate lace sheath. It's elegant and strong, just like you. As the seamstress expertly pinned and stitched, Jason returned to the ceremony space to speak to the guests directly. The live stream camera captured his every word. Today didn't go the way any of us expected, he said, voice calm but filled with conviction. But Val and I have always believed that a marriage isn't built on perfect moments. It's built on standing together through the hard ones. Another round of applause rippled through the screen. Melody pinned my borrowed veil into place and handed me my bouquet. You look beautiful, she whispered. Maybe even better than you did in the original dress. I looked at my reflection, and for the first time all day, I saw myself. Resilient, calm, completely unshaken. This dress, simpler and unburdened by expectation, suited me better than the original ever could. It wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about showing up for myself. Mr. Wilson knocked gently on the door. Valerie, you look stunning, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Jason is ready when you are. He hesitated, then added, I'm so sorry for what Margaret did. None of us deserved that, least of all you. You don't have to apologize for her, I said softly. That's her burden to carry. Jason made a good choice, he said quietly. And so did I. In the daughter-in-law I'm gaining today. The venue coordinator appeared. The musicians are ready. Would you like to walk through the garden to the ceremony space? It'll be a beautiful entrance. A sudden idea struck me. Can the live stream stay with us for the walk? Let the guests see the whole journey? Absolutely. A few minutes later, the live stream captured a scene I would never forget. Me, flanked by my bridesmaids, walking through the lush garden toward the ceremony, my dress trailing behind me like a banner. Guests applauded as we approached. their faces not just filled with wedding joy, but something deeper, respect. Jason stood at the altar, his expression a mixture of awe and pride. "You look amazing," he whispered as I reached him. "I feel amazing," I whispered back. "Let's get married." The ceremony that followed wasn't the one we rehearsed, but it was perfect in ways no rehearsal could have captured. Guests clapped when we exchanged vows, cheering at Jason's impromptu promise to stand by Valerie even if the world or our relatives try to come between us. Mr. Wilson presented the rings, having quietly taken them from Margaret's bag earlier. "Figured I'd play it safe," he whispered, winking. After the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the guests rose in unison, not out of tradition, but in a spontaneous standing ovation. The reception buzzed with the energy of people who had just witnessed something extraordinary. A custom Snapchat filter appeared, number sign Phoenix Wed, I murmured. "Me either," Jason admitted, "but I'd marry you in a rainstorm, a barn, or a parking lot, as long as it's you." Later, as the reception wound down, Mr. Wilson pulled Jason aside. "Your mother has locked herself in the guest house. She's demanding I choose between her and you two." Jason's expression didn't falter. "What did you say?" "I told her," his father said quietly, "that after today the choice was remarkably easy." Jason looked at me, the weight of generational patterns lifting off his shoulders. "You okay if we break some family traditions?" "I think we already have," I said, squeezing his hand. That night, as I kicked off my shoes in our hotel suite, I found my original wedding dress veil scorched, but salvageable. I hung it in the closet, a reminder not of what was lost, but of what we built in its place. Jason wrapped his arms around me. "Most brides get a dress. You got a legend." I smiled. "And the perfect husband." 3 months after the wedding, Jason and I made our first major public appearance as husband and wife at the Wilson Family Foundation's annual gala, an event I'd heard about for years, but had never been welcome to attend until now. And in the past, Margaret had ruled over it like her personal kingdom, every detail curated to reinforce the Wilson family's social standing. But this year, everything felt different. Margaret was no longer in charge. As our car pulled up to the Cleveland Art Museum, Jason adjusted his cufflinks and glanced over at me. "Nervous?" "A little," I admitted, smoothing the fabric of my gown, an emerald green design from Eliza's boutique, who had become something of a legend herself after salvaging our wedding with her emergency dress delivery. Eliza had turned our chaotic day into a wildly successful marketing campaign, Resilient Brides, spotlighting real women whose weddings didn't go according to plan, but who found their own version of happily ever after. Jason reached over and took my hand. "You'll be amazing, just like always." Inside, I barely recognized the atmosphere, the usual undercurrent of social climbing. The careful positioning and whispered alliances was gone. In its place was something warmer, more genuine. People smiled, not out of obligation, but with real kindness. And at the entrance, standing tall with pride, was Jason's father. "There they are!" Mr. Wilson's face lit up when he saw us. He embraced Jason, then me, the warmth in his eyes a striking contrast to the man I'd first met. A man who had often stood quietly behind Margaret's overbearing presence. The couple who inspired our foundation's newest initiative. He led us toward a beautifully arranged display at the center of the gala floor, where the Rising Phoenix initiative was officially unveiled. Framed photographs of women with stories of resilience, small business owners, single mothers, women rebuilding after leaving abusive relationships, filled the space. Each had been awarded a Rising Phoenix grant, a new program the foundation had created to provide funding and mentorship for women starting over after difficult life transitions. The new Wilson Family Foundation logo had been subtly redesigned. A faint phoenix, wings spread, rising from flames, had been incorporated into the crest. It was unmistakable. "We've already approved grants for 15 women," Mr. Wilson explained proudly, his voice full of hope. "Every one of them is starting fresh, building something out of the ashes." I felt my throat tighten. Jason squeezed my hand gently, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. I could feel how proud he was, not just of me, but of how far his family had come since that unforgettable day. As we mingled, I noticed a difference in the guest list. Margaret's carefully cultivated circle, social climbers, status-obsessed acquaintances, women who had once whispered behind my back, were conspicuously absent. In their place were local business owners, community leaders, and people who seemed genuinely invested in the Foundation's mission, not just its prestige. Near the champagne table, a young woman approached, her hand slightly shaking as she held out a program for me to sign. "Mrs. Wilson," she said quietly, "I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to thank you." I blinked in surprise. "Thank me? For what?" She smiled nervously. "Your wedding story, the live stream, everything. It gave me the courage to leave my husband. He wasn't physically abusive, but he controlled everything I did. When I saw how you stood up for yourself, how you and Jason stood together, it made me realize I deserved better." Tears pricked my eyes. "What are you doing now?" I asked softly. She straightened, pride creeping into her expression. "I used a Rising Phoenix grant to open my own bakery. It's small, but it's mine." I signed her program with a shaky hand, writing, "Never stop rising." When she hugged me unexpectedly, I felt the weight of every hard decision I'd made lift just a little more. Jason's hand rested on my back the entire time, his silent support as steady as ever. Later that evening, Jason and I slipped out onto the museum's terrace for a few quiet moments away from the crowd. The night air was crisp, carrying with it the hum of conversation and the distant laughter of guests. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, but all I could focus on was Jason's arm around my waist. He glanced down at his phone, his brow furrowing slightly. "It's Dad," he said quietly. "Mum's coming back to Cleveland." I stiffened slightly. "For good?" Jason shook his head. "Not yet. Dad says she's agreed to counselling if she wants any chance at reconciliation. Apparently, that's his condition." I studied Jason's face, looking for any signs of conflict or hesitation. There was none, just quiet resolve. The same resolve that had carried us through the fire Margaret started, both literally and figuratively. "Whatever happens," I said softly, "we'll face it together." Jason smiled, pulling me closer. "Some flames are meant to destroy," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "But others, they just reveal what's unbreakable." The Wilson family and our place in it was still a work in progress. Margaret's return might reignite old tensions, but it no longer terrified me, because Jason and I had already been tested by fire, and we had come through, not just intact, but stronger than ever. The woman I was 3 months ago would have tiptoed around Margaret, desperately trying to earn her approval. The woman standing here now knew better. My worth wasn't up for debate. It never had been. As we stood hand in hand on the terrace beneath a sky full of stars, I realized something. I wasn't just Jason's wife. I was my own person, someone who had fought for her place, claimed it, and refused to apologize for taking up space. And that, I knew, was only the beginning.